What's up, traders, and welcome back to another YouTube video. As you know, this is going to be a breakdown of my Bitcoin thoughts, right? So I've been sharing my thoughts in terms of what I see happening on the Bitcoin chart over the next couple of months or however long it takes for my prediction to sort of play out. But anyway, as I promised, I will continue to share my thoughts as I see the trades, or should I say the setup progressing, right? Remember, again, this is not financial advice. I'm not licensed nor qualified to offer financial investment or even trading advice, right? Everything I speak about on these videos is purely my own opinion. I do not recommend you trading live capital, but if you do so, do it with capital that you are willing to lose, or do it with capital that you're willing to risk, because you could lose your entire investment. I mean, it's really risky. If you're familiar with cryptocurrencies, you'll know that it's quite risky. It's a very volatile market, and it's crazy being in there. I mean, you have some crazy moves on a day in, day out basis, right? So without any messing around, let's get straight into it. As I said, these updates will simply be very short videos. I aim for it to be anywhere between 5 to 8 minutes. And the reason for that is I've already explained more or less why I'm looking at the market the way I am. So all I'm doing right now is just giving you an update as the setups start to progress, right? So looking at the market right now on the weekly chart, let me just grab my annotator. Uh, what do I use? What do I use? Okay, cool. Let's use this. All right. So looking at the weekly chart, we can very clearly see that we have a bit of a major key level that I've updated or I've highlighted in here, right? So we can see a lot of interaction with this level as the market progresses, right? So it rejected off here, then it broke through, and we can see a bit of a play towards this level, which picked the market back to the upside again. We can see that it took a lot of momentum to trade below this level. We can see the market interacting with this area again multiple times in here, but not really giving us a full-on move to the downside. And that tells us that there was still quite a lot of business to be done above this level. As you can see again, we have huge momentum that it took to break through this area. We can see another retest into this area and a pickup in that volume again. And as we came back into this area, we can see this huge rejection in this wick in here. And as you can see, the market wasn't obviously planning on just continuing to the upside for whatever reason. We can see this consolidation and then a build up in momentum to trade through that area. Now we can see that currently we did get a bit of a breakthrough, but we immediately came back below this area. We can see multiple rejections in this area happening right now. And that's still sort of motivates me to look at this market from a bullish perspective, right? Because when I see multiple rejections like this in an area, or when I see big wicks form like that in that area, that shows me that there's still a bit of business that needs to be done, right? Because if the market wanted to reject off this area, it would give us a big rejection, and then it'll begin to trend to the downside. We, however, have not seen that. So what I generally call a big wick like this is I call it unfinished business, right? So in essence, I would generally see, or I would generally be rooting to see the market then come back and want to get above the high of that wick, right? So overall, still looking at this market, I'm still pretty much bullish in this marketplace. From a market structure perspective, I can see that we had a higher low in here, which formed a higher high, right? As that was a break of structure that we saw in that area. You can see we had a bullish candle close to the upside. So currently looking at this marketplace, I would simply be looking at it as higher low, right? And then we have a higher high in this area here, right? And then we can see that the market is most likely forming some sort of a higher low at the moment. And the reason I would say that is because basically this would be my range in here, from here up into there, right? And as long as the market does not break below this low, it's still a bullish market, right? What we can see now is price has formed some sort of a low, but by my categorization, I wouldn't say that it's formed a valid high yet. So therefore, this I would be looking to see this market trade higher, right? So looking at this, I would say that this is now, I'm just going to draw this on, right? So this is now another higher low, right? And I'm looking to see if this market is either going to form a higher high again, right? Or if it's not going to make it back up into there and it's going to form some sort of a lower high in this area and then begin to trend maybe back to the downside, or just come back and retest this key level that we have in here. So as you can see, this key level has been sort of the level of support, we can call it institutional support if we'd like, because even though price traded through this key area with a lot of volume, we can see that it always seemed to hold from this area, right? We can see a lot of play at this area and then an increase in momentum again back to the upside. Even prior to this initial breakthrough of this overall key level that I've got marked in here, we can see some sort of interaction with that. So what we can say is that if price breaks through that area, which it obviously has done, we want to see a pullback, and we want to see what price then does when it comes into this area. Will most likely give us some sort of a small breakthrough before it pushes higher, but that's not necessarily anything that we need to focus on for now. Looking at this weekly chart, I would simply say that I'm now looking to see this pullback from this area, whether it's, as I said, going to form a higher high, or whether it's going to pull back and then come back down into this area in here. As we use that information, we can then drop down to the daily time frame. And if you'd like to, you can look at your chart patterns, you can look at all of those things, right? I obviously don't use those things to trade, but just to sort of draw your attention to something, I have thrown on a trend line in this area, right? So that you can sort of make sense of what I'm currently looking at. You can see that that trend line, we did have a strong breakout of that trend line, right? And price hasn't necessarily retested that trend line. So what I would actually be looking for is to see if price wants to come back and, as I said, either interact with this area, give us a small breakthrough, and then begin to trade back to the upside from there, right? So overall, I'm still long-term bullish on this market. Looking at the weekly time frame, if we get this weekly candle close above this area, we can then expect to see the market want to revisit around these areas, because we can see that there was a bit of a resistance that was formed up in this area. So what we could do is perhaps put a zone in at that area in there, because that's where that interaction happened. And we could say that if we get a candle close above this area, we can then begin to start looking for long positions. Don't take this as a setup, because this is in no way where I would enter or put a stop loss, but we could be looking for long positions, perhaps back up into around this area in here. As you can see, the risk reward on this would be insane for you to take a 1 to 1.6 trade. So it's in no way a trade that I would be taking. I would obviously be looking at the lower time frame to see when price begins to turn around, and that is when essentially I would want to get involved in this marketplace. Looking at this from a daily perspective, however, we can see that price is interacting very strongly with this area right now, which is obviously the key level that we've marked on the weekly. We can see that price has come into this area and it's rejected. It's come back into this area, and it's now showing signs of wanting to actually go lower, right? We could also look at this from a chart pattern perspective, where we could mark up this area in here, from here to there, right? So those lows, and we could then mark up these highs in here, right? And we can then see, okay, this is a continuation pattern, right? Because we've got a push to the downside, and then we've got the market trending higher, right? Trending, making higher lows and lower highs at the same time. So it's a bit of a continuation pattern. I'm not even sure if that I'm actually speaking the truth right now. But if you're familiar with those patterns, then, you can make use of those, right? So looking at this, I would then expect this market to sort of want to push back to the downside based on what I can see on the daily chart. So I would be looking to see what this market wants to do next, purely because the fact that it formed a lower low in this area, right? Formed a lower high, we could call it at this point, then formed a higher low, lower high, higher low. And so basically we're waiting for that sort of spring back to the downside, or that pick up in momentum and that breakthrough to see this market want to shoot back to the downside. Now, there's obviously a lot of other things that I would be looking at in this marketplace, and purely because I'm not going to share those concepts on this platform, I'm not even going to touch on those things. So simply looking at this right now, I'll be looking at this as a bullish range, right, from this low back up into this high in here, right? So that would be my lower low slash higher high, right? Because I would technically call this a break in market structure in this area here, because we can see a candle close to the upside. It's very messy, so it's not necessarily something that I would put a lot of risk behind, right? So it's not necessarily something that I would be looking at, but looking at that, that would be my bullish range. And then I would be simply looking to see this market start to go higher, right? But we can already see that we had a retest into that range, forming this higher low in this area here. And that higher low has failed to perform as a higher low should perform, which is break structure and then continue to form a higher high. Apologies for that. So that is already telling us that, perhaps the bullish momentum hasn't come into this marketplace. However, this lower high that was formed in this area also failed to perform the responsibility of a lower high, which is then to break structure and form a lower low, right? So this market is currently very indecisive, but I'm leaning more towards the bearish side purely because of what we can see happening at this key level on the daily chart, right? So hopefully that did share a bit of knowledge or a bit of insight for you guys. I hope you did get something out of that. Be sure to take it back, have a look at the charts, and always stick to what your analysis tells you, right? Don't ever switch your analysis based on what you might hear on my channel or on anybody else's channel, because at the end of the day, nobody is going to be 100% right? The purpose for this is for me to just shed a bit of light on what my thought process is and why I'm looking at the market from that perspective, but never use it as a reason for you to go back and change your analysis. Always stick to your strategy, provided that you have tried and tested it and it has proven to be profitable, right? So until next time, it has been a pleasure as always to share with you guys. And I am wishing you a blessed weekend as it is Friday. And I'll catch up with you guys again on the next video.